All right, you guys, welcome back for Strategy 4 of TABE Language E. Again, we're working in this book. It is the level E with the green label. TABE score boosts language, not reading or another subject. Take out your book, please, and get to page 18 with me. And like always, if you haven't managed to obtain this book from your intake location yet, you can navigate over to the left side of the course page, click on Files, and then the folder TABE Language E Pages to get to the correct scan. And we're on Strategy 4 today, so if you'll open up Strategy 4, either digitally or in your book, we'll get started. The good news is that this is not as long of a lesson as the previous one. There's only a couple of pages of instruction to go through here. And it is on punctuation, so this is going to be a real practical lesson that'll give you some tips, some conventions, some rules in using commas and apostrophes to punctuate in several different situations within sentences. Also quotation marks. So our first section tells us about using commas and quotation marks. And commas are an important type of punctuation. They're used to separate words. By using commas correctly, you will make your ideas clear. Review these common ways commas are used. And probably when you were first in school, you were told that a comma denotes pause. Like when a sentence pauses, there should be a comma. And that's in general true. But that doesn't always get us all the way there. There are some rules about when and where to use commas. Sometimes even rules that are intentionally broken here and there about using commas if a sentence is shorter. So comma usage is a pretty big topic. We're not going to cover all of it in this lesson. We actually took a look at one use in the previous lesson with using a comma and coordinated conjunction to punctuate a compound sentence with two independent clauses. But here we're looking at some different situations. All right, so we'll just dive right into it. So greetings of letters and emails. So let's say that you are signing an email or a letter that you sent to a personal connection of yourself, or personal connection of yours, I should say. So dear Jillian, we're going to put the comma after Jillian. Hello, comma, Paco, comma. So you may be wondering, why the two commas? Well, hello is considered to be an interjection, so we put a comma after it. It's an interjection that expresses greeting. And so we put a comma after it, and then we also put a comma after Paco's name. Not a greeting that we'll use as much probably, but dear Jillian or to whom it may concern, although to whom it may concern is followed by a colon, not a comma in a business letter. In closing letters or emails, we do the same thing. So if you're signing off a letter or email after the words sincerely or respectfully or whatever you want to put there, you have a comma and then your name. In this case, Matt has just signed off with take care, but just like sincerely, it needs a comma after it and before his name. Here's a real comma or common and expected use of commas, separating cities from the state that they're in. Savannah, comma, Georgia, El Dorado, comma, Arkansas, Baton Rouge, comma, Louisiana, Los Angeles, comma, California. And then with quotations, we're used to seeing commas used in this way, but I don't think it's something that we think about very often. It kind of becomes invisible. But if we are going to quote something, and when you get to GED writing, you will be quoting something, I guarantee it. That's part of the expectation. But if you're writing a story and you're quoting something or trying to write down dialogue, what a character says in a story, then you're going to need to know how to punctuate it correctly. And you're going to need to recognize correct punctuation of quotes when you see it. So let's look at what's here. So the actual quote is have a nice day. That's what Mrs. White said. So we put quotation marks around the quote. But notice that we use a comma at the end of the quote before we close the quotation marks. And that becomes before, we call this either the tag or the stem, the said Mrs. White or Mrs. White said. But a comma must come after the line of dialogue to give that pause before the tag, the place in the sentence where we say who said it. But what if we wanted to move the tag to the front of the sentence? That's legal too. Dad called, and then we have a comma to introduce the quote, and then the quotation mark, or the quotation itself. Hurry up, in quotation marks. Whatever punctuation goes with the quote, whether it was a question mark or period, it stays. It stays here to end the sentence. Unlike in the previous example, where we changed that punctuation mark to a comma because the sentence had not ended yet. All right, here's our example. I'm going to a baseball game tonight. There's a quote. It's surrounded in quotation marks that correctly place the comma here inside them to get ready for the tag. Candace told Jim. And now we have another one. Jim replied, and then we have a correctly placed comma here after this tag that starts the sentence, which introduces the line of dialogue. So the quotation, I'm jealous, and then the period that ends the quotation because it ends the sentence. All right, so it says in the first sentence, the comma goes before closing the quotation marks. It separates the dialogue from the name of the speaker. And dialogue just means words or that characters say that are recorded in written form. In the second sentence, the comma comes before the opening quotation marks. It separates the speaker, Jim, from the dialogue. So there you go. The purpose of commas in setting up quotations is to separate the quote, what is said, from the person who said it. All right. We're skipping past the exercises, the activities that you're going to do on your own, and then come back as we go over those in the second video. But the second and final topic that they want us to cover is contractions and possessives. And both of these concepts use apostrophes as their quotation marks. And the apostrophe kind of looks like a comma, but it's up near the top of the line instead of like at the bottom of the line. Of course, you can see it here in use. But we got a couple of different situations here where we use the apostrophe. Contractions and possessives appear in all kinds of writing. Contractions are when you are contracting a verb phrase like do not into a shorter form, like don't. Or possessives when you're showing ownership or possession of something, like Billy's car. A contraction is a word formed when two words are combined. An apostrophe replaces our letter or letters that are removed when the words are combined. For example, do not can be combined to form the contraction don't. The O in not is replaced by the apostrophe. They will can be combined to form they'll. The letters WI are replaced by the apostrophe. See how that works? So we're leaving letters out and we're replacing them with the apostrophe to smash the word together into one word. All right, now we're going to look at possessives, and possessives show ownership. A possessive is always a noun, right? Only nouns can own things. The person, place, or thing owns or has something. The apostrophe comes at the end of the noun and is followed by an S. So, for example, Billy's dog, we have the apostrophe S, loves to play fetch. Billy ends in apostrophe S because Billy owns the dog. The cat's claws are sharp as another example. Apostrophe S. In this case, the cat has sharp claws. Therefore, apostrophe S is placed at the end of cat. And I don't see it here in this lesson, but remember, if you're dealing with a plural like cats, the cat's more than one clause, then we would put the apostrophe after the S. That's what we do when we have a plural possessive. It may not come into play in this lesson, but I promise you it will in the near future. Okay, so some examples here of some contractions. Didn't is a contraction of did not, and of course the apostrophe is replacing the O. Couldn't is very similar. Could not. He'll, he will. Kind of like a they'll that we looked at up there. The apostrophe replaces the WI of will. There is a contraction of they are. You know, don't confuse this with the two other theirs, the THERE, like over there, and the THEIR, which is actually a possessive pronoun, which we're not going to talk about today. But just don't mix it up with this contraction there. And then possessives. If we have a noun and we want to show that that noun owns or possesses something, or is composed of that particular thing, made up of that thing, then we use apostrophe S. The book's plot, apostrophe S comes in after book to show that the plot belongs to the book. The cupcake belongs to Carol. The windows belong to the house. The glasses belong to Grandpa. The animals belong to the zoo. But as I've said, and we'll see this in action later on, let's say that books was plural, then we would move the apostrophe to after the S, and that would show that we're talking about multiple books, more than one. All right, our example, look at how contractions and possessive can work together in the same sentence. Mom's car, so possessive, the car belongs to Mom, didn't work, so now we have a contraction that's the shortened version of did not. Didn't work this morning because the car's, another possessive, engine, the engine belongs to the car, wouldn't start. And here we have our last contraction, a contraction of would not. The engine would not start. Mom's is a possessive, Mom owns the car. Didn't is a contraction, it combines did and not. Cars is also a possessive, the engine belongs to the car. Wouldn't is another contraction, it combines would and not. And I am going to read this tip here at the bottom because it's pretty important. Contractions are used in casual writing like emails. In business writing, though, they're less common. And I'll say formal writing, or the kind of writing that you're going to do on the GED language exam, don't use contractions. Formal language is spelling out the verb phrase. So don't, use do not. Don't use won't, use will not, and so on. So contractions are considered to be informal in a formal or academic writing setting. So if you're writing for work, or if you're writing kind of in an academic situation on a test, then it's best not to use contractions at all. Okay, so that completes the instruction part of Strategy 4. Like always, do the exercises on pages 19 and 21. And after you've given those your best shot, come back here for the answer video where I will go over the answers and do a little bit more instruction to help you understand why the answers are what they are.